Everyone, welcome back to my next video. You're probably still anxious to see my build, and I'm not quite getting started on yet. I've ordered all the parts. I'll put in a vent first, a fantastic fan. That's the next thing I'll do. All the parts finally arrived in from Amazon. I'm planning my build. I've bought a bunch of materials here from the local Ace in Blythe. So I'm getting ready, and when I get going on that, I'll do build posts. But right now I want to continue with my last post, which is which van should you buy? I said why I bought a van instead of an RV. But and that was all entirely philosophical. I'm not going to do any more philosophical. This is to answer your question, and one of the most common questions I get is, what van should I buy? Is there a van that will be more reliable than others? And if so, please, I really want to know, and I got to buy that van because I need a reliable van. And there, of course, there is no one van that will be most reliable. There are so many variables. In fact, the big questions to ask yourself when you think about what van should I buy are, will you do the repair work yourself, and how much can you afford? Because the van that will work for you will be very, very different based on those two answers. If you can't do the repair work yourself, then you should buy the newest, most reliable van with the lowest miles you could possibly buy. I can't do my own work. I don't want to do my own work. I don't have enough tools, and I don't have the knowledge and skills. So I bought the very newest van I could possibly buy. But if you still don't have much money, if you only have $2,000 or $3,000, then you're still going to be buying an older van. So then the question is, how old can you buy, or is it better to buy an old van? Should I buy an old van or a new van, or what should I do? And a lot of you just have no information about vans or engines in general, and so that's your important question. Behind me is my old van. It's the 2001 Chevy with the Chevy 350. A very old, very well designed, great engine. Behind me is my new 2015, new to me, 2015 Chevy with a 4.8, very new, very reliable, very low mileage, and it's by far the best choice for me. But if I had a budget to pay for that. So which van is best for you? That's the question we're going to answer today. Let me give you a little bit of history. I think that having an understanding of what's happened and made vans change and engines change will help you to make a better choice for you. In 1970s, there was terrible air pollution in this country. Terrible. In fact, it was so bad that Richard Nixon, not a communist or a liberal, created the Environmental Protection Agency, because we had to solve our pollution problem. The cities were becoming unlivable with air pollution. Our water was terrible. The rain itself literally fell out of the sky with acid in it and was destroying things. The environment had to be protected. So the EPA came in 1970 with total bipartisan support. Both parties, every politician recognized we have to protect our environment. Things have to change. And so we did. We created the EPA. The EPA set certain guidelines. Another thing that happened in 1970 was the gas crisis. All of a sudden, gas was very expensive. No one could afford it. And we realized we were all driving around in cars that got 10 miles to the gallon. So we couldn't afford the gas. We were burning so much gas, and gas was getting so expensive. So the EPA set rules and standards to increase the clean burning of our cars and increase the fuel mileage, the miles per gallon our cars got. So that started a train of changes that resulted in these two vans. My old van gets 14 or 15 miles to the gallon out of its Chevy 350. My new van gets 20, 21 pretty easily out of its 4.1. Those are the results of the changes. In 1970, if you owned a Chevy 350 or a Ford 360, you'd get 10 miles to the gallon at best. That's what you could expect to get. So we have leaped from 10 miles to the gallon to 20 miles to the gallon because of the EPA. The EPA is the best thing that this country ever did. It was critically, well, there were other things that were just as important, social issues. But one of the best technical things we ever did was create the Environmental Protection Agency. The quality of every American's life has gone up dramatically. And so I'm a big believer in the EPA and the rules that give us cleaner burning and better gas mileage. They've also made the vans much more reliable. In 1970, you were lucky if you got 100,000 miles out of any American-made car, truck, or van. Today, 200,000 is easy. It's expected. That's also because of the EPA and because of the changes they made to get more reliable, to get better miles per gallon and cleaner burning, also gave us more reliable vehicles. So I'm a big fan of newer. But all those changes that gave us the better miles per gallon also gave us fuel injection and computers. And that made the new cars and engines much, much more complicated. This 2015 is a very complicated piece of equipment. It's got computers and sensors and all kinds of things that can break that a 1970 Chevy van did not have. On the other hand, my 2001 is somewhere in between. It still has a lot of computers, it has a lot of sensors, things that can break, but not as nearly as much as this 2015 behind me, and not as much, and none out of a 1970 van. So you have a trade-off. You have the super simplicity, but poor reliability and poor miles per gallon of a 1970s and into the 1980s vans. And then you have the super miles per gallon and reliability and complexity of a 2000s van. So there's a continuum that from 70, when there was nothing, to 2015, when there was a lot. And how far back you go in your purchase decides how complicated it is. In the 80s, we switched over to TBI, throttle body injection and fuel injection. And by the 90s, most American cars were running fuel injection instead of carburetors, and they became much more complicated, much more difficult to maintain. You look inside the engine of one of these vans and you can barely see the engine. There's a lot of things going on in there. And so some people say, no, buy an old van or any motor because they're so easy to maintain. Anybody can fix them, anybody can repair them, but I don't know how. And so it wasn't even a consideration. I'm not going to learn how. I don't want to learn how. I don't have the tools, the time, or the money to learn how, and I'm never going to. So I rejected old vehicles because of that. If you can do the work, you will save money in repairs, lots of money in repairs, by doing it yourself. If you break down on the side of the road, which you will do more often because it's not as reliable a vehicle, you can fix it by yourself right there, probably with parts you have on hand. If that appeals to you, buy an old van. It does not appeal to me. I'm not going to do it, so I bought the newest van I possibly can. That's my advice to you. If you know how, there is a good reason to buy an older vehicle. In the 80s, they started coming out with throttle body injection, then fuel injection. By the 90s, they all had fairly advanced computers. OBD1, onboard diagnostics, is what that means. It was the initial computer system the federal government regulated. In 1996, they came out with OBD2, onboard diagnostics 2. Every vehicle since 1996, with a very slight lag in there of them being phased in, has OBD2. To my opinion, buy a 1996 or newer van if you can afford it, because you'll get OBD2. You'll get better diagnosis, you'll get better understanding of your engine. But again, if you can do the repair work yourself, you may be better off with a much older engine without any computer. I have a friend who keeps telling me, and he's absolutely right, if it's not on there, it can't break. If there are no computers, it can't fail. If there are no sensors, they won't break on you. That's what breaks on these new vehicles. They're so much better made that it's the computers and the sensors that give you the problem. Sometimes the sensor will go wrong and the engine will be perfect. I just had that happen to a friend. The sensor went bad, but so the engine thought it was running bad, and the computer created a problem. She replaced the sensor, the computer was happy, and everything ran perfectly again. So the next big evolution in engines happened in about 1999 for Ford and 2002 for Chevy. The old engines could not keep up with the EPA demands for clean engines and better miles per gallon. So they got rid of all the old legacy engines and created new ones. Well, in 1999, Ford went to its new Triton engines, which was the 5.4 and the V10 and their V6, and I don't even know what size that was. Here's the problem. Ford did a very poor job in designing their new engines. They put aluminum heads on them, which there's nothing wrong with aluminum heads, but they put too few threads on the spark plugs. So all of a sudden you'll be driving down the road and a 1999 and newer Ford engine, Triton, will simply blow the spark plug. I had that happen to a friend of mine. She had a, I think it was a 2001 Ford van with a 5.4. It had 220,000 miles on it. She's driving down the road and it blows the spark plug. Cost her $500 to repair it. So starting in 1999, I do not recommend Ford vans. They may or may not have a problem with the spark plug, but you never know. It's a pure crapshoot. It may or may not. After 99, I don't recommend Ford vans anymore. Prior to 1999, I had a slight preference for Ford vans. I thought they were better. So prior to 1999, I would buy a Ford with a 302, would be my first choice. Or, well, actually, my very first choice would be a Ford, prior to 1999, would be a Ford with a 300 inline six, one of the best engines ever made. Really an excellent engine. If you can find a Ford with a 300 inline six, that's a great engine. The newer the better, so it has fuel injection, but any of them is a great engine. After 1999, I do not recommend Ford at all. I won't buy one. I will buy a Chevy. In about 2002, Chevy started putting their 5.3, their 4.8, and their 6-liter in their vans and trucks, and they are a great engine. They are a superb engine. That's what I have in this, is the 4.8. I've had numerous friends with the 5.3. They will took a friend and I drove her van to Alaska, 9,000, and we averaged 17 miles to the gallon. That's averaged. And let me say that again. We averaged 17 miles to the gallon. It ran perfectly. It's been absolutely trouble-free. She now has like 160,000 miles on it. It's been trouble-free the entire time. Average 17 miles to the gallon. It's a superb engine. If you can afford it, buy a Chevy van with a 5.3 in it, or the 4.8, or the 6-liter. They're all great engines, but the 5.3 gets the most power for the most miles per gallon. I'm going to recommend that above all other engines, above all other vans that you can buy. The newer Chevy 2002 or later with the 5.3, the 4.8, or the 6-liter, the best you can buy. Prior to that, I would have recommended either Ford or Chevy with a 350, 351, but the Ford with the 302 or the 300 inline six were great engines. That's what I would buy, one of those. Nothing wrong with the Chevys before 1999, before 2002. They were all good engines. The 350 is a great engine. The 305 is okay engine. But here's the thing with any vehicle. Maintenance trumps reputation. The most important thing you can do is buy a vehicle that was well maintained. If they have the records to show you it was well maintained, that's great. If you are not a mechanic, don't even depend on records. Take the vehicle to a mechanic to get it inspected. Again, let me repeat that. The most important thing you can do in buying your vehicle is take it to a mechanic to get it inspected. He will tell you what's going on, what your future is with that van. The single most important thing I can tell you that you can learn from this video is take it to a mechanic. If you're not a mechanic, if you're a mechanic and you already know the answers, you can do it yourself. If you're not a mechanic, which most of us are not, don't buy a used van without spending $60, $70, $100, $120 to get it checked out. I bought a 1993 Ford. That was my last vehicle before the 2001 Chevy van. I took 4 of them to a mechanic's. I spent $80, and he told me the first 3 were junk. He said, there'll be nothing but problems. I took him the 4th one, and then he said, hey, this is a great Chevy pick. It was a Ford. It was a Ford with a 302. He said, this is a great pickup. If you don't buy it, I will. And so that's in that van. I bought it with 130,000 miles on it. It lasted to 230,000 trouble-free. At 200,000, it started having troubles, which is what I fully expected. At 200,000, expect to start having troubles. That's just the way they are. They'll get 200,000 trouble-free miles generally, and then you're going to start having, at 198,000, I put in a new transmission. And I put in, just before then, I'd put in a new alternator. Then I put in a new starter. There was a cascade of failures starting at 200,000 miles. That's typical of all today's engines, and one of the reasons why people recommend the old engines. So there you have it. That's my advice. Let me repeat this. I want you to get this. This is the most important thing you can do. Maintenance trumps the reputation of the engine. If a mediocre engine, well maintained, will last forever. A great engine, poorly maintained, will fail quickly. Maintenance is most important on any engine. The best engines made are the Ford, the Chevy 3.5, 5.3, 6-liter, or 4.8. That's what I bought. That's all I recommend. After that, the inline Ford 306, the Ford 302, and then after that, they just all fall in line. They're all about the same. Ford 350, Ford 351, Chevy 350, basically the same engine. Great engines, both of them, no difference. So there you have it. I hope I've given you some history so you understand how things have gotten more complicated. If you're a mechanic, you may want the uncomplicated old engine. For everyone else, buy the newest and best you can afford, least miles. After 1999, buy a Chevy. After 1999, buy a Chevy, period. The Chevy 350 is better than any 5.4. The 5.3 Chevy is better than any 5.4. So that's my recommendations. There you have it. All in a nutshell. In the future, I'll tell you about diesel, and I'll tell you about the new Eurovans in my next video. So we'll talk then, and I will see you later.